Got 2:01, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And Jeremy, it's all yours.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Meg, and glad to be with everyone today. It's really great to see so many folks on Zoom and being with us today as we start to onboard the next group of technical assistance grant recipients. It's my pleasure as NACD's CEO to be part of the webinar today, just to get to know each of you a little bit as we begin to share information with you. But I wanted to be on personally just to welcome everyone to the program, to provide my support and to congratulate you on being successful in receiving one of the technical assistance grants from NACD. We've been doing this program since 2017 now, and you join a pretty strong network of other conservation districts all across the country that have participated in this program. We've got some that are brand new this year. We've got some that have participated for multiple years, and all of the participants in the program sharing a common goal of increasing technical capacity at the local level, continuing to expand ability to serve landowners, whether that's in delivering technical assistance and conservation planning assistance, or delivering specific program assistance through programs like EQIP and CSP. So again, very pleased to have everyone with us today. Also, just want to say how grateful we are to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources Conservation Service for their partnership in helping to deliver this program. Certainly the NACD, the Conservation District, and NRCS relationship is something that is central to the program. And so we're very pleased to be working with our partners at USDA, as well as partners like the state agencies that contribute to this program, the district employees, RC&D councils, and many others that play a role. So I just wanted to say hello to everyone and look forward to the rest of the webinar. And I think I'll turn things back over to Meg.
Thank you, Jeremy. I put out the agenda ahead of time. We haven't tweaked it, but we've got a lot to cover. Hopefully it'll be very helpful for you. One thing we're going to do so that people aren't trying to talk over each other is we're going to save all the questions to the end. But if you have a question, use the chat box, and then we'll bring them out. If you're on a phone or for whatever reason the chat box isn't working, one of my colleagues has offered to collect texts, and so her text number is 406-570-4193. So you can text her with your question during the webinar if you can't get the chat box to work. So we're going to start off going around, and I've asked each of NACD's 7 region reps to just take a minute and introduce themselves when you have a chance to be able to see them in person. The reason why is because they are the ones that you really are going to be interacting with on a more focused basis when you have questions about how your grants work and some of the particulars. So going down the list, Beth.
Thanks, Meg. I'm Beth Mason, and I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I cover the North Central region states, and that includes Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And that's me.
Thanks, Beth. Eric?
Hi, yep, I'm Eric Hansen. I am the Northeast Region representative. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I work with our states all the way from Maine down to West Virginia and Maryland. And I'm excited to report that the hurricane has now officially moved past us here, and it's on to the rest of my region. So stay safe out there, everybody.
Thank you. Good news. Sunny.
Hi, everyone. Sunny Hikas-Mapton, Northern Plains Region Representative. I'm based in Ennis, Montana. So my states are Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas. That cell phone number that Meg gave out is mine. So hopefully I can handle the multitasking, and congratulations to all of you who have been awarded the technical assistance grant. This is a great program and we're all super excited to see what you do.
Thanks, Sunny, and appreciate the help today. Ariel.
Good morning, everybody. I am Ariel Rivers. I am the Pacific Region Representative based in Livermore, California, just an hour east of San Francisco. I cover Alaska, American Samoa, California, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, Guam, Hawaii, Idaho, Oregon, Palau, and Washington.
Thank you. And Keith.
Good afternoon. I'm Keith Owen, the South Central Region Representative. I'm located in Norman, Oklahoma, and my region consists of Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. Again, I'd like to congratulate all the new and successful applicants as well.
Thank you. Candace?
Hi all, good afternoon and congratulations. I'm Candace Abenanti. I'm NACD Southeast Region Representative. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and NACD's Southeast Region is 11 states and territories. So in the north, it's Virginia, out to the east, Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, South Florida, and all the way out to the west, Mississippi. So if you're any of those states or territories or in between, please add me to your contact list.
Thank you, Candace. And our last region rep is Jeff Burrell. Jeff had a conflict for today, so he won't be able to join us, but he covers the Southwest region on the map. And the reason I really wanted you to know who your region rep is anytime that you have a question, you're most likely going to start with your region rep first and have a conversation with them about what's going on, and they will bring it to me if it needs to have a more extensive conversation. But that's your point that you're going to start. And anytime you might reach out to me or I might be answering a question, I am going to be looping your region rep in so they're aware of what's going on. And the reason why is with our 3 rounds of grants, we actually have roughly about 300 different grantees across the country, and I cover the entire country. So to be honest, I'll remember you most likely, but I'm not going to remember the specifics of your grant. And your region reps are the ones that are going to at least be able to pull up the specifics of your grant much quicker and be able to talk more specifics with you in terms of where you are and what you're doing. So getting into our agenda, the first place we should start, probably the place that most of you are going to be focused on right now, is how to staff your grant. What are you doing? What are our requirements when it comes to hiring staff, whether you're going with contractors or staff? And it really boils down to, we're going to leave most of that, those concerns and those decisions to you as a local level, because you are the ones that know what's going on in terms of what you need to have done and who would be the best people to be doing it. The difference between whether you want to use staff or contractors really comes down to what are the specifics and who you can find to do it. As you put together your proposals, you probably had a pretty strong idea of which way you were going. The only thing I want to stress to you is if you haven't ever looked into the IRS's rules on contractors, if that is the route that you're going, you probably want to put some thought into reviewing it. I am not a financial consultant, so anything I say in terms of finances and such should be taken with a grain of salt and referred to whoever you feel comfortable speaking to on these things. But my understanding of IRS rules are, with a contractor, you basically give them a list of expectations And between the two of you, you're going to agree on what you're going to pay them, whether it's so much per hour and they're going to put in so many hours, or a flat, you finished the project, therefore I'm going to pay you a flat fee. You're not going to give them any kind of oversight. They produce for you a finished project. If you're hiring staff, you're going to be giving them oversight. And really what it boils down to is we all work with public funds. We all know that we should be respecting the nature of those funds and trying to get the best deal we can, spread them as far as we can. But we also know that the best staff needs to be paid whatever the going rate is. And when you're covering the entire country, we do not have pay scales because the going rate for one type of work for possibly a generalist is going to be very different in one area than perhaps in an area where someone's trying to hire a specialist to do a particular task. We expect that you will pay enough to hire competent personnel, our contractors, and that will be your local decision on what those pay scales are. If you are hiring staff, you may or may not be offering benefits. Again, we do not have any guidelines on what benefits need to be included and which ones don't. We leave that between you and whoever you're hiring, contractors or staff, on what it is that you're offering, and that should be part of your agreement with them. I also want to jump right into talking about COVID before we get into a lot of the nitty-gritty details. It's part of life these days and has been now for what, 6 months, and possibly who knows how much farther in the future. Our existing TA grantees have given us, about 6 different ways that COVID has been impacting their grants, starting with hiring process, particularly when we all had stay-at-home orders, the ability to interview and actually go through the hiring process got very slowed down. We've had people reporting getting NRCS link passes has also been a hurdle. Finding trainings, attending trainings, and then we get into the stuff that we're all dealing with in terms of grower interactions, how to do a field day when you have size limitations or other aspects, office staffing restrictions, and how to handle sick staff and staff family members. When it comes to our guidelines, first and foremost, follow whatever your local guidance is in terms of what you should be doing safely. We will not second guess it. You tell us this is your local guidelines, we'll work with that as the starting point in how we're going to handle how you're dealing with COVID in terms of this grant. The next point, and the one I actually put on the slide, is document, please document. And that is not sending your region rep and me an email. I will show you when we get into the quarterly reporting form, there's actually a section of the form set up for documenting COVID and the impacts of it on your grant. Use it. Not only is it a permanent record that goes with our grant information, but one of the things that we do then is compile all of the impacts that are going on across the country and put it into a summary in our report that we turn into NRCS. So by having the details of what's going on locally and what is or isn't happening because you are dealing with COVID allows us then to be able to add it to our documentations that we are supplying NRCS. One of the things we would like you to keep in mind, of course, is we can't just put everything on hold. If COVID is impacting your ability to meet deliverables or your intentions of what you're doing with your grant, start thinking outside the box. Could be some simple ideas, it could be something complicated, but we're also looking for you to hopefully be able to find workarounds, ways to make these grants can work and continue to work, ways to be able to address what it is that you're trying to do, even within limitations of what this year is throwing at us. Worst case scenario, COVID and COVID impacts may cause you to need to extend your MOA, and I'll get into discussing what to do if that's something that you need to look at with your region reps down the line. We certainly would understand if, due to documented impacts, you're also looking at the fact that you're not going to be closing your grant in 13 months because you've had delays that have slowed things down. And the next thing I want to touch on is financial tracking. If the group of you are typical of what we've seen with past technical assistance grants, some of you have handled grants and you're pretty comfortable in what you need to do to be able to work with a grant. But there will also be a large percentage of people that this may be the first time you've ever had a grant. With that in mind, we do try to have some resources available, but I first want to talk by looking at what's required out of your MOA, and the text on the screen is from your MOA, and it says that you're going to keep financial records in a consistent manner. Really what that boils down to is if you have local auditing of any sort, they should be able to feel comfortable with how you're keeping our financial records in order. And so what it comes down to then is, how does the finances actually work? First off, for most of our grantees, we advance the funds. What that comes down to is roughly about 30 days, give or take, after you've returned your signed MOA, you will receive a check. And I am sorry to say that we are working towards having electronic transfers, but at this point they are not in place. So you will be receiving physical checks in the mail. That first check will be roughly 25% of your grant funds. So you'll be able to hit the ground running. We're not looking for you to be worried about finding other ways of paying expenses. We want to be able to get the funds out to you in a timely manner. From then on, unless you tell us that within some of your plans you have something different going on, roughly every 90 days, you will receive another 25% of your grant funds. So at least as far as the grant funds are concerned, the funding is coming out ahead of hopefully your spending. One thing I do want to touch on here is, until your MOA is countersigned by you locally, you cannot be doing any kind of activities in terms of match or such towards your grant and counting it as match or as towards your accomplishments. But once it is, the second signature is on it, you can start using activities. And so you may be already working towards, if you've got an MOA signed, getting your hiring done, getting it advertised, and those expenses and those times, those activities can be worked towards your whole entire grant in terms of match or activities. When it comes down to your financial tracking in terms of what tools you're going to use, choose a tool that you're familiar with. Looking across the entire spectrum of grantees, we have a number that use QuickBooks set up to track their grants with. A large percentage of the grantees use Excel spreadsheets, and we even have one or two that admit to actually using paper still for doing their grant tracking. Whatever is acceptable with your local auditors and is clean. And by clean, I don't have a good word for it, so I went with clean. You've got to have financial report tracking that is reviewable by someone that's not you. I spend a large percentage of my job doing forensic accounting, which means that I am trying to help someone dig through old financial records to be able to straighten out when there is a discrepancy between one set of something reported and whatever the local books are. And worst case scenario is between the 12 months of starting the grant and possibly closing the grant, some of you will leave to take another job and someone else will come in and have to try to figure out your financial books. And so when it comes to the grant, it will be much appreciated by everybody involved if you keep very clean, clear, make notes if something is a case where 6 to 12 months down the road, you're not going to be able to remember what in the world that meant. Make a note and include it in the report. We do not require that you put your grant funds into a separate bank account. But when it comes to keeping your tracking, I highly recommend that you track your grant funds separately. If you've spent any time balancing books, you ought to be able to be aware of, especially if you use an Excel spreadsheet method, of just some way of keeping track of the grant funds, the match funds, that's not your basic checking account that you're using for the general operating funds of your organization. Now, as I said, I do realize that for some of you, when talking about financial tracking is pretty basic and you've probably do this in your sleep. For other people, this begins to get a little bit more involved. And so we do have a handout on our website. And if this works properly, it should flip your screen to our website. Someone give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the website. Okay, good. Thanks, Beth. On our website, under resources, if you click on the technical assistance grants and scroll down, there is a financial reporting guidance. This is a handout. It's actually a PDF. The region reps or myself can email it to you if you forget how to get to it. What we've done is set up a little 30-page document, and it takes the amazing county SWCD getting a TA grant and walks you through hiring staff and getting them going, and talks a little bit about what might happen under the life of the grant. But in particular, I want to scroll down here if you excuse the screen jump, is it gets into how to take your financial information of what's activities are going on during a typical quarter and how to then transfer it into your quarterly reporting form. And so if you're not familiar too deeply with financial reporting, you may find the whole thing is a nice little introduction. If you are, you may find the second half where we actually go through and talk numbers as a good way of understanding how to take your financial reporting and what's expected on our reporting forms. The other thing I want to point out in here is there is a section discussing fringe, those benefits, and just some ideas of what might or might not be included in fringe. But also, one of the areas that we run into with grantees that end up being a large discussion is what is cash match and what is in-kind match. To kind of put it a little bit in perspective, cash match is where your organization is putting up cash, whether that is coming from the state, whether that is coming from a other partner, NGO, or some other partner coming to you, or whether it's coming out of the district general fund. You are putting up cash that is supporting your grant supported staff. And that could be cash towards their salary. It could be, oh, for an example, you decide that your grant supported staff needs a computer. And so for the cash match, your district is putting up the cash to buy the computer. You wouldn't be buying the computer if you didn't have the grant supported staff that needed it. So that's cash match. On the other hand, assuming you've hired staff, so they're being paid income, a salary, not as a contractor, and as part of them working there, their supervisor spends an hour a week making sure their paycheck is set to go, and generally just giving them guidance and or reviewing some of the work that they're doing. The supervisor is paid a salary. And for the sake of argument, we're going to just say that the district is paying the salary for the supervisor. So the supervisor is paid whether you had a grant supported staff in that chair or not. On the other hand, the fact that they are spending an hour each week helping the grant supported staff and making sure their job works means that that 1 hour of salary and fringe that's being paid to the supervisor can be counted as match towards your grant supported staff. And that match is in kind. So in kind match is match that is being paid to support your grant supported staff, but it would have had to have been paid otherwise. As you go through this handout, it has some different examples of things that can be used for in-kind match, sorry. And it's not supposed to be definitive, and including the one thing I do want to stress through this entire handout is it's purely hypothetical. We realize that out of the, well, we're up to 90 people on the call. So we're going to say out of the 80 different organizations that the group of you represent just on this call, you probably do 80 different things with your finances. And so this handout is not meant to be definitive. It's meant to give you some guidance, hopefully give you some ideas of where to go with things. The one thing I also want to mention is in your MOA, you are committed to supplying so much match. When you worked out your initial budgets, it could have been that you envisioned the entire match being cash, and so those cash funds are what you have available. And as you work through, you end up realizing that you have more match that you can actually count. You are not required to report that additional match, but I do want to encourage you to consider reporting it. And there's a couple of different reasons why. First off, for your own case, if you start off and find that you've got lots of extra match, you may find that by the end of the grant, you don't need to put as much cash towards fulfilling your side of your obligation, which means that you might be able to save a little bit in your own general funds, your own operating budgets to be able to use elsewhere. It includes the fact that, over 12 months, situations may change. And if you find that you are having issues getting enough match, having counted a lot more extra match in the beginning certainly gives you a buffer if you're having issues collecting match at the end. The last thing is more of a general thing, and that is these grants are supplied through our agreement with NRCS. We take what you're doing and report it back to NRCS, and one of the aspects that certainly helps them know that these grants are being used both productively and are quite helpful for people is when we tell them, here's what the minimum match should have been, yet the grantees, the districts and the associations and such that receive the additional funds gave us this much more match. They took our funds and made it that much more useful for themselves. And so it helps us with reporting to NRCS to be able to show that people are going above and beyond what's required of them to be able to get these grants and be able to use them for productive information. So continuing on, that gets to the next step of modifying budgets. What do we need and what's required? According to your MOA, if you need or want to shift more than 10% or more of where you've assigned the money on your initial budget worksheet, then you need to actually file paperwork. It is filed with your region rep. That doesn't need to go with me. Not every circumstance will require a new budget worksheet filed, but that is where you should start if you end up deciding that you need to shift funds. An example might be that you funded, and if you know within the limits of your grant how much you put towards it, but say you put 5–10% of your funding towards some kind of equipment or supplies. Once the staff got in, you realized, I don't need that. So now you're going to want to shift that maybe back into salary, or perhaps put it into training or travel. So you would fill out a new budget worksheet, and it wouldn't cover just the funds that you're shifting. It should cover your entire budget. Another possibility would be the other way, is that you didn't budget anything for equipment or supplies, got some staff in, got 6 months down the timeline, and realized that it would be really helpful to have a do-mug-jigger, and that's going to cost you some money. Can we shift the budget to be able to afford that versus something else? And again, fill out a budget worksheet, submit it into your region reps, tell them what it is you're doing. They may want some explanation about why and wherefore, but they will be able to receive that and take that through and be able to give you an okay. I want to remind people, as it says on the slide, if you've got questions, use the chat box or text Sunny, and we'll cover your questions when we get to the end. So that gets us into the quarterly reports. Our quarterly report system does not use a login, and so you don't have to worry about resetting passwords and trying to remember your credentials. The program we use, the site we use, is called FormStack, and it works under the assumption that if you're there and you're reporting, then you know what you need to be doing and you're there. Again, I want to refer you back to your MOA agreement that you have signed. We require quarterly reports, and we have kind of twisted that one piece, and that is we require you to submit quarterly reports from the time you receive your first advance. There will be situations, not so much for you all as starting brand new grants, but perhaps for someone looking at a renewal where they will have a signed MOA but will not have received their funds yet, and for them we give them a waiver until they actually receive their first funds. Once you receive your first advance, your quarterly reports are due until you close the grant. And as you can see in this text, it's very clear when they are due and how to go get it. It is in your MOA. I do want to add that while it is on your MOA, once we get you up and running, I'm still getting paperwork straightened out and done. I will be adding the contact for every grant onto our listserv. We can also add anyone else that might want to receive the listserv emails. On a typical quarter, your first report will be due for the quarter ending September 30th. So taking October, your first report will be due by October 20th. I will send a reminder through the listserv on October 1st It will include the link to the reporting form and a, hey guys, it's due, and possibly a short or longer email of if there's something going on with the reporting form or what I'm seeing in terms of people's reports that I would like people to pay attention to. I'll send a second reminder, usually approximately about the 10th. Same basic idea. And when we get out to the 20th, I usually, if I haven't done it on the 10th, at least by the 20th, I will give a list of who is outstanding on reports and give you yet another reminder to get your report done and in on time. So we're going to follow the link to the reporting form. There are 2 links built into the beginning of the reporting form that I want to bring your attention to. And it's in this little paragraph here. First off, there is a link here to a video. Video's roughly 30-40 minutes long, but I've sat and worked through filling out a form, and so you're welcome to watch it. It's on YouTube, and you can see me filling it out. In particular, when it gets into the financial information, I have filled out the form using the amazing county example for where those numbers actually fit going on the form. The other thing I want to point out here is right here is I've gone through and captured screenshots of the entire form. And you are welcome even now, if you want to be able to have a chance to understand what the form is, to be able to go download the PDF, and it will give you a chance to see the entire form. Most of this front page is all text, as you can see. Particular one I bring out to your attention is we recommend that you move around the form using the tab button. Particularly when you get to entering the financial information. If you use the mouse, sometimes it will not actually save the numbers you've put in. I don't know why. But the other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is the save and resume. When you filled out the application, you weren't able to save it. One of the things that I actually was annoyed with the way it was set up, but I couldn't do anything about. But with your quarterly reports, you can stop in the middle, save it, and come back to it. It's important to realize I have no access to the information that you saved. So if you lose your link and the logback information that they will give you, I can't get it back into it. Your report is lost to the ether. It also will expire after 30 days. When you get down, the report is set up into the basic report as 8 pages. Each one follows a sort of theme. The save and resume later button is here at the middle of the bottom of the page, and then you'll have a next button. It occasionally will get sluggish, and so if you get to the bottom of the page and you don't have a next button, let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes. It will usually show back up. I'm not going to take you through the entire form, but I did want to show you a couple of things that you need to be aware of. The first of well, it's page 2, but the first page that you're actually going to complete anything is identifying yourself. We do sort your reports by region. It's important to realize that's not the region you are in your own state, but our NACD region, hence the map that you saw me scroll by. And then we have a drop-down list of all the different grantees. And it will probably take me till the end of August before I'm sure I'll have all of your grants entered, but you can find your grant. So when you come into this report, you're going to go to this list. It's alphabetically by state initials and then the names of the grant, and you're going to find your grant. If you don't find your grant, you can go all the way down to the bottom where there is a not listed above, and enter your grant in. But I should get all of your grants entered, as I said, by the end of August. So if you go into this to try to poke around, you're not going to find yourself now, but by the time you're turning in a report, it will have been updated. Whether you choose an existing grant or if you're filling in other, it's going to ask for a contact person, phone, and email. And this really right here, what I use that for is if I have a question, that is the person I am going to start talking to and reaching out to. So whoever's name gets put in here with their contact information should be that point of contact of, if there's a question, this is who I'm going to go to. If that person has changed, you check the box saying this is a change. The other thing I want to stress is whoever's email gets entered in here should be, after you've submitted a report, receiving a PDF of the completed report. So you do want to make sure that you've typed that email in properly so that you will get that PDF copy. If you don't see it, I can pull the reports for you. You just have to ask for it, but do be aware that that email is important. The contact person is important because, as I said, that is the person I'm going to reach out to if I have a question in regards to what you've submitted into your report. As you can see, I can only put one person in here, so if there's other people within your organization, the contact person's job is going to be to make sure to pass my questions along to them. So when it comes to filling out the report, some of the grantees use the save and resume. And so they may have one staff person fill in the accomplishments portion while another staff person does the financial. And so what they're going to do is use that save and resume after the accomplishments are entered for the second person to then be able to go back into the draft form to be able to enter the remaining information. But for some people, whoever is reporting, doing the reporting, may be actually getting accomplishments from multiple people, or possibly someone that they just don't share an office with, so it gets a little complicated. And so one of the things that we have available is this invoice. We call it an internal invoice. And let me start by saying this is not something you will ever submit to me. This is a tool for you to use. What it is designed for, and the first couple of pages are equip information, which most of you do not have equipped funds in your grant, but it also has a way to get the answers to all of the questions that the grant form is going to ask in terms of what information you need to be able to complete the grant. So it is meant to be a tool for you. It does follow the form, but a way to be able to collect information perhaps from staff in another office before you actually submit the information then into the form. And it goes through and asks all the questions. The link to that is a little bit hidden, but the region reps or I can send you one if that's something you might want to be looking for. The other issue that happens often enough is that you know when the grants are due, but for one reason or another, you don't have all the information you need to be able to complete the report. Whether that's you or other people within your team, you just don't have all the pieces that you need. In that case, your MOA clearly says you are required to submit a report on time with the information you have and document what might be missing. So get your report in. If for chance, and this actually happened in a couple of cases for the reports that were due July 20th, over the 3 weeks between the end of June and July 20th, someone was out on vacation. And so it was just, they knew going in that they could not get the report, everybody there to collect all the pieces to get it submitted. You can always submit a preliminary report before the end of the quarter, and so be able to get it in before it's due if you know going out that that timing is going to be an issue. You also can submit a preliminary report with just the information you have anytime up to the 20th and be in compliance with your MOA. What we ask then is that you go back and submit a supplemental report when you collect the other information that you're missing. On the report, I think it's on page 3, is a question that you'll see here. Everyone gets it. Have you previously submitted a report for this grant for this reporting period? Most of the time, if this is your first time reporting for a quarter, you're going to say no. They give you the ability to submit a supplemental report, and it's actually the third option here. This is in addition to the previous. You're not going to repeat any information that was already submitted, but you can use it to add the missing information to your report. The middle option is another one, and that is used occasionally by people. It's a replacement report. After you've hit submit, you realize that there's not just a minor screw up, there's something major that you've submitted incorrectly. Rather than trying to do a supplemental report and just change the pieces that need to get changed, you can submit a replacement report. When you hit replacement report, it actually doesn't delete the past report. What it does is it comes through to me with a flag, and I go through and I delete the data off your previous report, so it's not added up into your complete report from all your different reports. But it gives you the ability to basically wipe out your mistakes and start over again. Excuse me a minute. All of this is getting up to non-compliance with your MOA. About the only place at this point that we really enforce the compliance with the MOA is in regards to your quarterly reports. Even if nothing happens during the quarter, if you have been issued advanced funds, we expect to see a report from you saying nothing happened, and if there's a particular reason why nothing happened, telling us what that reason is, documenting what's going on within your grants. Those reports are expected to be submitted by the 20th of the month following the end of the quarter. If you miss reports, the first thing that might happen would be is that I will put a flag on your next advance check, and until you get your reporting caught up, we'll probably hold back your advances unless there's a particular reason and we can talk it through. On the outside, what will happen is, assuming we get additional technical assistance funds and it does look positive for next year, you will all have the option of applying for continuing funding. And if you have a history of turning in your quarterly reports late, or in particular missing, we will inform the state leadership, state conservation leadership, that it is not our recommendation for you to continue getting funding unless they want to help ensure that your reporting is happening and happening on time. So out of all the things that we ask you to do with your TA grants, one thing to put a big flag around would be turn in your quarterly reports, turn them in on time. And that way it continues to let us know, one, how you're doing with these grants, what your issues are, but also helps ensure continuing funding possibly for you. And that gets into what I touched on earlier, which is extending your MOA. Most MOAs get extended because somewhere along the line a delay has happened. And so if you are looking at not being able to close your grant in the timeline specified in your MOA. Then what you want to do is contact your region rep. Doing it by email helps document what you need and why. And we ask that your email to your region rep includes 3 points. Why are you asking for the delay? What do you plan on doing to address it? Because it may be a minor delay, it may be major, but if we don't have plans in the works to be able to address it and continue spending these funds, it becomes, are we just spinning wheels? And then we'd like you to suggest when you then think you need your MOA to end. When do you think you will be completed the work that you've specified? Our agreement with NRCS is usually about the only piece that might affect when you want to extend your MOA to, as long as you're turning in your quarterly reports and documenting what is going on. So we are pretty comfortable, pretty flexible if you need to extend an MOA, but we do need you to have that discussion with your region rep on what's going on and how you expect it to work out. And that leads up to you finished your grant and you need to close it. All of these grants need to have a formal final report, and that doesn't matter whether you have spent everything or you've reached an endpoint and have decided that you don't want to continue. To give you an example of one of the ones that I just had a conversation with in the past week, they had to go through when they started their grant and hire someone. It took 6 to 8 weeks to get someone hired. About 7, 8 months into the grant, 9 months into the grant, the person gave their notice. And they then lost them and were looking at having to go through the hiring process all over again. They didn't have any additional funding coming, and so they knew that they were hiring someone with roughly 3 months of funding available, and looked at their accomplishments and ended up deciding that in their case, they just decided that rather than rehiring for that position, they wanted to just close the grant and move on. We would be much happy to work with you if you're in that situation to try to find a solution to move forward and help keeping you productive. But we also understand local decisions can decide some of these issues. So either way, when they decided that they need to close their grant, or as I said, they've spent all their funds, it's time to end the grant, you're going to use the quarterly reporting form. When you go into the quarterly reporting form, it gives you 3 options for reporting periods. Most of your grant and most of the time you're going to use the quarterly button, and that's the default, what it will be set to. There is a very few situations where we might ask someone to switch to monthly reporting. You're always welcome to do it yourself if you want to, but usually on our end, it's because something's going on and we need to track what's being spent, what's being done much closer. The third option there is for your final report. And so when you are done with the grant, you're going to click on Final. The first 8 pages of the reporting form are just what you've been doing every single quarter. And in fact, we do not want you to, on the final report, to submit anything that's already been previously submitted. On those 8 pages, all you're going to do is add anything that was missed or has been done since your last quarterly report. Then you'll get to a new page 9. The page 9 talks about the end of your grant, and if you've indicated that you haven't finished spending all your funds, it asks how much you're sending back. When I get your final report, if it indicates that you're going to be sending something back, I will reach out to you and give you instructions on how to return the funds. If you've indicated that you've spent everything, I'll do some basic checking, usually of your financial reporting, to make sure that we are in agreement that you've spent all your funds, and then we'll officially close your grant. I'll send back a confirmation. Now, all that gets into a situation of additional funding. And there are two different ways we could give you additional funding to your grant. The first is gap funds. Gap funds are a situation where, well, due to my example, say, of that one person returning a quarter of their funds, by the time you get to your end of your funds and you've spent all your funds, we may have some unallocated funds still left available. And so within the same grant cycle, in your case, it would be TA 2020 funding, we may at that point offer you the chance to have some additional funding. Gap funds is what we'll refer to them as. If you receive gap funds, that is in addition to your existing MOA. And so if you have gap funds, you do not want to close your grant until you have spent not only your grant and match, but as well the gap funds and any match that you needed to put towards those gap funds that you've received. The other possibility, and I touched on this, is there will be at this point at least one more additional round of TA grants down the road. If you are awarded another round of TA grants, you will also get a new MOA with those grant funds. And that is a separate grant than the grant that you're about to start. And so in that case, you would need to close your existing, in this case, TA 2020 grant, and then start reporting on the new TA, in this case, 2021 grant down the road. And it's important to realize that those are separate grants and need to be tracked separately. That's a year off for most of you, even longer possibly than that. And so I just wanted to put it out there so you're aware of it. It's not something you need to be thinking about for now. And with all of that, I have now talked for just about an hour. And so if you have anything question-wise and you haven't had a chance to type it into the chat box or text it to Sunny, please do so now. And Sunny, do you have any questions for me?
Yes, we do. So we've got some good ones folks have been sending in.
Wonderful.
Verification. Folks can start counting their match as soon as they have a duly executed MOA, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Second follow-up to that, is there a benefit to match as cash versus in kind?
We would certainly rather see more cash match than in-kind match, but we are not going to penalize you if you have more in-kind match than cash match towards these grants.
Okay. Great. And then for those of you who've been sending messages, and if you don't feel as though Meg's answered directly the question that you have submitted, just follow up with an additional one. Another question, do you want timesheets, receipts, etc. that document match submitted, or is it better to do internal filing system for those?
That is a very good question, and some grants require you to turn everything in. We don't. If we should audit you, I will certainly be asking for that additional documentation, and so you should be keeping it internal. But for your normal quarterly reports, we are going to take you at your word at how much you've spent for each category, for each topic, and that your books are being locally audited each year or each couple of years, and so you are following basic financial requirements.
Great. Okay, an additional question. Would the second round of funding be competitive, i.e. would we have to apply?
I can't speak definitively at this point, obviously, until we get into it. What I would anticipate is that next year, if there is a TA 2021, we will go through pretty much the same sort of process that we went through this year, and that is that all existing grantees would have the opportunity to indicate that they would like priority funding. There would be an application involved in that. It may not be as long as the one that you've already completed. And from there, we would then have to discuss with your state and territory conservation leadership to ensure that your work that you're focused on is still a priority within their priorities, and that they still support continued funding for you. So it is not as competitive as the RFP process, but it will depend entirely on how much funding we get and whether your state leadership, state and territory leadership still considers what you're doing a priority compared to where their interests might have shifted in the meantime.
Okay. And this came up as an additional question that is not a question, but I guess it was an illustration. Somebody hadn't gotten their MOA, and we had been seeing some of this where some of the grantees were seeing communications coming in and going into their junk mailbox. So I guess I wanted to just make sure that we, bring that up and make sure that folks know that that is a possibility for communications regarding their grant. And I know that you had some suggestions on how to kind of help make sure nothing falls through the cracks in terms of communication.
Good point. I don't have it all laid out. Let me see. Can people see that?
Yes.
Okay. What you really, oops, sorry, wrong thing. I'm trying to get back to Zoom there. What you need to do, I think, is mark my email and your region rep's email as a safe sender. And this is an Outlook. If you're not using Outlook, there's probably a different manner of marking our emails as not spam. And put us on that list will be helpful. I try not to send too many attachments and too many links, but obviously when I send out notices that your reporting is due, it's going to have at least the link to the reporting form. We have had large problems of people's emails, especially if you're on the NRCS system, that you're receiving your email through going into spam and the trash. You might try talking to your IT people, but I'm guessing that putting it on a do not block this sender is probably the solution that most people should be trying to use. So thanks for the reminder, Sunny.
Yeah, that was somebody else that brought that one up. So. And as far as I can tell, there's nothing else in the chat box. I would, though, for all of you, if you have a question, there's no such thing as a dumb question. And it's so much nicer to hear, these come up and to give a chance to talk to them real broadly, because chances are somebody else has the same question. So, okay, here we go.
I do want to say that I don't know how long it's going to take to get the recording posted. Once I have it posted, I will put it out. In addition, I will put out the PDF of the PowerPoint slides that I'm using, so you'll have all these links. Have it so you won't have to have been scrambling to try to write down links to try to figure out how to get to some of this stuff.
Yeah. Okay, one more. As we begin the hiring process, are there any examples of job announcements that we can use for hiring, or do you have any suggestions on positions?
That is a good question. It might not be a bad idea to start for the region reps to have a library of some typical job postings. The issue that I would have with it, and get into this a little bit on a different way too, is that what we have seen is that out of 100, 200 grantees that we've had to date, I can divvy up the job position titles into about 150 categories. When you look from one position to another position, someone might be hiring a technical specialist of one type or another. Someone else is just hiring a generalist, a resource technician who's going to wear a lot of help. Someone else might be looking for a watershed coordinator. Your person that you're looking for has a very specific list of what tasks you want them to do, and trying to find a general hiring notice to put out to that will fit exactly all the different jobs is kind of tough. That said, that might be a goal for the region reps and I for next year's round of grantees. We don't have one now. What I might suggest is twofold. If you're aware of a grantee, another TA grantee in your general area, think about reaching out to them, asking them what they used. The other possibility is if you go out to our website, we now have an interactive story map set up. Give me half a second. Let's see. So if you scroll down, there it is. It is an interactive story map, which means you can zoom in and actually say, if you're in Iowa, you might be able to find where some of the other grantees are within your own state. So even if it's the other end of the state and you don't actually know who has a grant, you may have a chance to be able to tap someone that's in your general vicinity within your state, see what work they're doing, and talk to them about what they used for a hiring description, a job description. Anything else, Sunny?
Yeah, there's, we're getting some more
Good.
text. I'm wondering if those who are using QuickBooks for managing their grant, if they would be willing to share how that is being done. Are there any workshops or training available for someone who is new at using QuickBooks?
I don't know of any training for someone being new to using QuickBooks. You might try talking to your state and territory leadership to see, if there's someone else within your area that is using QuickBooks. Some of that does vary by states on whether it's allowed or not. But in terms from our level, I really can't tell you. I know when I worked for a district, I found a book for helping with QuickBooks for nonprofits that personally I found was very helpful for setting up a soil and water district QuickBooks account. But that was quite a few years ago on time scale. I don't know if the book is even still available. And in particular, it wasn't looking at our grants, setting them up with QuickBooks. If you are interested in Excel, I do know that we've had a couple people share kind of their default Excel, what they're using. I would be happy to send that out to anyone who wanted to use it. If you've gone through the financial reporting handout, I have built an Excel spreadsheet that follows the handout. It's very convoluted, and I much more recommend that you build your own because you'll understand what it's doing and how it's working, but you'd be welcome to get the template of that as well. I'm afraid I don't have any QuickBook information. I haven't used QuickBooks since I stopped working for a district years ago. Anything else, Sunny?
Yeah, we're looking at 7 new messages at this point.
Sweet. We've got 20 minutes.
Okay, as long as funding for this grant continues, are we able to continue applying, or are we restricted at some point?
Your ability to continue replying is a function of your state and territory conservation leadership considering that you are still a priority within the state. At this point, we have no intention from our end to capping it as long as you have your state and territory conservation leadership support. We will continue being able to send funding in your direction.
Okay. If you haven't hired staff yet and one of your board of directors is volunteering their time to start work on the grant, is the director's volunteer time on this grant considered in kind?
Yes. How to charge that? Rich, actually, if he's still on, might have some guidance. Your commissioner, supervisor, whoever their title is that they're working under, when they're working as in that job on your board, their time can be charged at $50 an hour. And so if your board meets and spends some time discussing the staff, discussing the work, that certainly can count as in kind. If that person is actually doing some of the work that you've gotten the grant for, if it's, I would think if it's within their normal work, you can charge whatever in kind as whatever their normal rate would be if they were hired by someone to do the work. If they don't have that record, I'm afraid I don't have numbers. I can find it out for you if Rich isn't on the call anymore. Rich, are you able to answer that? I'll have to find an answer for that particular situation.
Okay. And I will note too, if any of you are sending your questions directly to Meg, NACD, as a host, send them to the chat to all, so then we can see them. Another question, if your MOA is fully signed, can attendance at this training be charged against the grant?
I would certainly think it could be charged as in kind, yes, if your
Yes.
MOA is signed.
Okay. Another one, the council has 5 recipients, 5 conservation districts. It's my understanding that they enter their accomplishments independently and the council submits one consolidated financial report.
I think that is Connecticut, and they have a special situation that I call the Texas model, of which the state conservation agency is the one with the grant, and then each of the districts is working separately. And so they have a special situation that's not typical for anyone in a equivalent situation where you have a state level agency association as the one holding the grant, and then they've got basically embedded staff working in some different districts. There is an option we can discuss on ways to simplify some of your reporting, but for a typical grantee, that's not going to be a situation that we can have. If you think I've given you enough that you're curious about it, contact me directly is probably the best answer.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like a unique situation. This one, just a note, an individual is using the NRCS soil conservationist job description as a basis for the job posting.
Thank you for sharing.
Yep. How many of these hires are required to be on NRCS computers, referring to people who are not co-located?
That will be entirely a function of your agreement, what you've put forward in terms of accomplishments, and how you propose to have those accomplishments work if they're not on an NRCS computer. I would say probably start that conversation with your local NRCS staff and go from there, and then bring in the region rep for your area if you need to discuss it further.
Okay. If we have funds in the air quotes training portion of our grant and want to send an existing staff to the training along with the new hire, can those funds cover the existing staff if the training is related to the project as a whole?
If the training is related to the project, then certainly, but it would have to be for existing staff who has time dedicated towards the project also as part of what's going on.
Okay. We have an individual offering to make some recommendations on how to set up QuickBooks. Thank you for that. At what point do we ask IDALS or districts to give us the matching funds, the cash funds?
IDALS is for the state of Iowa. It is the state conservation agency, and their districts get at least part of their match directly from the state conservation agency. You know, I lost the rest of the question.
At what point do they, I mean, I imagine people have had those conversations about coming up with a match, but at what point do they ask them to like provide the match, I guess?
Yeah. That is something that really, it's different in each state. And so when to have that conversation in terms of match, hopefully you have figured out where your match is coming from before you turned in your application to the RFP. And beyond that, it's really a discussion, a local discussion. And all I can say is if you're struggling now after the fact, reach out to your region rep. One of the things that the region reps will give you that I really don't know is within each of the states within their territories, they usually have a fairly good idea of if you have a local issue. So say something like this, who within your state conservation partnership should you be talking to try to find a local solution to it. And I can tell you who the state con is and who's in charge of the association, but I'm not going to be able to give you that local information of which conversation you really need to start with if there's someone you need to talk to. In terms of this situation that you're putting up for Iowa, that conversation probably should have happened before the application went in, but the sooner the better if it hasn't.
Yeah, okay. This is another good one. If our funding is meant to pay for 1,000 hours of one person's time, but they actually work 1,200, can we use the extra 200 hours they work as match?
If you are paying for the other $200, that certainly counts as match, yes.
Okay. And that is the end of what I'm seeing in the chat box. Again, if you have sent questions directly to National Association of Conservation Districts or to Meg, post them on either a private message to me or to the everyone. I'm not seeing any other texts. Yeah, and I think, you know, there's, just to reiterate, obviously Meg has said this a number of times, but we're here to help. That's why we're reps, you know, come to us with questions. There's nothing that you're encountering that probably hasn't been encountered before. So, is it acceptable to use this, one more question, is it acceptable to use this position for education and outreach related to EQIP, or does it need to focus exclusively on TA related to contracting and field work?
That is a good question. Outreach for CSP is certainly a valid use of the funds if you have CSP. In particular, one of the metrics we collect for CSP is, have you done presentations? Have you made contact with people? How many people attended your presentations? And that is purely outreach. When you're getting to the conservation operations TA funds, some of that does fall into outreach because there is an aspect of talking through with people of what you can do on this property within your operation. And so that is going to fall a little bit into outreach, but equipped outreach per se is certainly meant to be not quite so much. The outreach there is going to fall under your CODA funds, not so much your equip funds, and it should be within the sense of discussing what they could be doing on their landscape, whether it's an operation or a large-scale landscape.
Okay. Regarding overhead, are we allowed to charge overhead or count as match?
Overhead per se cannot be charged against the grant. On the other hand, if you have expenses, and using the example from the financial handout of, HR to be able to do certain activities, that can certainly be charged as match. Beyond that, it may be a case where we need to look at exactly what it is that you're wanting to charge and how you're wanting to charge it, and we'll have to discuss it on an individual basis.
Okay. Are we required to post the job and interview, or can we take a referral from another employee?
Good question. Again, that one is a local choice. If it's within your local guidelines in terms of hiring to take a referral, then you certainly can do so. But that is a case of within your organization, depending, of course, on how your district is set up and whether that would be acceptable in terms of if they were hiring a full-time hard cash, meaning that it's a dedicated salary employee, would they be able to just hire through word of mouth, or would they have to post it? And that's something I can't speak to.
Certainly. Okay, regarding the W-9, specifically box 4, are districts exempt?
You know what? I'm not familiar enough with the W-9 to know what that box is, I'm afraid. So ask me that one outside, I guess, of this recording when I can take a look at it and at least give you a guess. Again, I am not a financial consultant. You're better off talking to your local county, state auditor and get their take of that.
Okay. A confirmation from Rich. He's struggling to get off of mute. Meg was correct regarding the in-kind topic that was addressed earlier.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, that's all I'm seeing. If you haven't heard your question addressed, put it in the chat box, me privately, put it in the chat box to the group, send me a text, 406-560-4193.
Thank you so much, Sunny. And to add to what she just said, if after you get off this, and I really appreciate everyone that has stuck through to the end. I really didn't think we'd go the full 90 minutes. Feel free to reach out to your region rep, to myself, and ask any follow-up questions. We want to, as Sunny had said, I would much rather answer the same question 5 or 6 times before someone does something than have to go backtrack and help people fix an issue where they've made an assumption and I disagree with what they've decided that they're going to do. So please do ask your questions as they come up. We are here to help you and hopefully to make this whole process as smooth and easy as it can be, and so you can get staff out there being productive and getting some things done and getting more conservation on the ground. So thank you all for joining us. And with that, I think we'll be clear. As I said, I don't know how long it will take to get this recording posted, but thank you so much for sticking with it to the end.